Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Other regulators governed by bipartisan commissions often fall victim to dysfunction and infighting that undermine their ability to act decisively. Some examples are the SEC, the FEC, and a number of other agencies governed by bipartisan commissions are frequently subjected to periods of gridlock that prevent the agencies from acting. Furthermore, the single directorate is common by banking regulators such as the OCC and the FHAA, and the Bureau has been able to do its work to date effectively through a single director. Mr. Miller, we often hear from the majority that if the Republicans were to win the White House, Democrats would prefer a bipartisan commission to a single director. How do you respond to this particular critique of the CFPB's governance structure?
I have a long list of horrors if Republicans won the White House. This would be on it. I think that the lack of continuity is a problem, as I said earlier. I think that there is obviously a trade-off. There are some advantages of a five-member commission. But a single, as Mr. Clay, as she said correctly, some of the five-member commissions don't work that well. And by the way, five-member commissions can turn over fairly quickly as well. There's not necessarily a huge amount of continuity with respect to five-member commissions. Not everybody still serves out their full term. Also, with the D.C. Circuit having interpreted arbitrary and capricious for their standard of review to mean would I have done exactly the same thing, it becomes much harder for agencies to present a rule in a coherent, tight way to survive judicial review, because some members of this committee probably have no experience at all with compromise. But I have as a member of the House and as a member of the state legislature in North Carolina, and it's sometimes kind of ugly. And sometimes the only explanation I have for certain sections of the bill was, yeah, I thought that was stupid, but I needed votes and that was the only way I could get them. Yeah. That's not really what you want to take to the D.C. Circuit in trying to defend an agency rule on judicial review. But that's what you end up with when you've got to put together 3 votes on a 5-member commission.
Let me shift to H.R. 1737, reforming CFPB, Indirect Auto Financing Guidance Act. Mr. Miller, according to the Center for Responsible Lending, African Americans receive higher interest rates on car loans obtained from car dealers and similarly situated Caucasian borrowers, even after controlling for several credit measures, while those who receive loans directly from banks or credit unions do not. In addition, African Americans pay higher purchase prices for their cars even after actively negotiating with the seller. In light of the long-standing and well-documented concerns about car buying experience for minorities, do you think our time is better spent seeking to nullifying guidance that clarifies the CFPB supervisory expectations for indirect auto lenders, or should our time be spent actually rooting out discriminatory practices?
Yes. With respect to auto loans, there is, just as with mortgages, the HOPA, I think it's the HMDA data shows that it costs about 25%, or about a quarter of a basis point more for borrowing while black. It costs, according to CRL, 29 to 40 basis points more, which could be several $100s over the course of a car loan for borrowing while black. And it's perhaps not quite as expensive to borrow while brown, but Latinos are also discriminated against. What the CFPB did is, no, the CFPB cannot regulate car lending by a dealer to a purchaser, but then they sell those to banks, and banks end up with discriminatory loans, and they've got liability for that. And what CFP did in their guidance is say fairly gently, you're going to have a problem, and instead of using that kickback that you're paying dealers if they talk somebody into a higher interest rate than what they should have gotten, which ends up with discriminatory lending, a discriminatory lending portfolio. Maybe you should consider paying them a flat fee instead. That seems a fairly modest bit of advice.
Thanks for your response.
The gentleman from